Warning, these are not rest of season rankings. These are not week 11 rankings. These are fantasy football playoff rankings, okay? So we're going to be looking at schedules for weeks 15, 16, 17. We are going to be aggressively ranking injured players, sending up a prayer that we have Ja'Marr Chase back by then and a few other names. But before we get into it, go down there, drop a like on this bad boy, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. And down there in the comment section, you can find a link to Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, you can check out all these cool player props and get into weekly drafts with us on the live stream. My favorite player prop of the week is Davante Adams for more than 86.5 receiving yards. If we remove the flu game, he's had this pretty much every single week. It's kind of a crazy line. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up 200, available in damn near every state. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into these playoff rankings. Starting off, numero uno, we got to put Justin Jefferson here, right? I mean, looking at what we had from Justin Jefferson this past week, with the catch, with the tough matchup against Buffalo, I don't care the schedule. I don't care about anything. I feel like it would just be so disrespectful to look at what Justin Jefferson has done through the first 3 seasons of his NFL career and say that he's anything lower than 1 at this point. Maybe we're a little bit biased because we had the best catch we've seen since Odell Beckham Jr. I got to put him at 1. At 2, we are actually going to be going with Tyreek Hill. With Tyreek Hill, what's kind of nice is, hell, he plays in Miami. I mean, I don't necessarily think we have to worry about him having too many bad weather games, even if it's going to be at the end of December that we're looking at this playoff schedule with. Tyreek Hill, he's been the number 1 wide receiver so far this season in receiving yards. I mean, he has been crushing with just double-digit target games almost every week. Not much to discuss. We will go Stephon Diggs at 3. Stephon Diggs right now is actually the number 1 wide receiver from a fantasy points per game perspective. Be a little bit worried playing in Buffalo, though, that maybe we have a game that's just nasty, nasty weather that time of the year. But going over to what we are going to have tier 2, I'm going to roll the dice and say Ja'Marr Chase. Now, with Ja'Marr Chase, if he was 100% healthy, maybe, just maybe, we could have him as a tier 1 player. But, of course, would be very difficult for us to go through and do that, knowing there's always the outside chance that this injury is re-aggravated, that maybe it lingers way longer than anybody expects. But I'm assuming Ja'Marr Chase will be back by then. And with this injury, if you are a team that's maybe 8-2, 9-1, and you're guaranteed to go to the fantasy football playoffs, probably opening up a buy low window for you. But going over to wide receiver 5, Davante Adams. With Davante Adams, like we said, I would go look at the underdog line, 86.5 receiving yards. I mean, this is a wide receiver that has no Waller, that has no Hunter Renfrow in his offense. I mean, that should be the case for the rest of the season, or at least that's what I'm assuming it will be. And now, of course, the issue is this is just a horrendous offense, but it may not matter with the volume the man's seeing. But now dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go DeAndre Hopkins at 6. So with Hopkins, if you're looking at our weekly rankings, you will see that he's higher than 6. I mean, since the first week that DeAndre Hopkins was back from the suspension, that first week back, we ranked him as a top 5 wide receiver automatically. I mean, he's an elite level guy, but I will say by the time we get back to the fantasy football playoffs, we will have Hollywood Brown in this offense, someone that we will talk about later on in this video. So maybe the targets will be a little bit more difficult to come by. And then at 7, we are going to have Jalen Waddle. Thought long and hard about these next 2 rankings. We'll go Waddle 7. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 8. Honestly, throw A.J. Brown in here as well. Let's talk about all these guys together because I think you can go one way or another. Now, full transparency, I love Waddle. Everybody makes jokes about it, yada, yada, yada. Yes, I love our guy, Jalen Waddle, my most drafted wide receiver in fantasy. I am going to root for him. I am very biased for him. I will say maybe from a rest of season ranking standpoint, maybe you give the slight edge to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's just had a ridiculous amount of targets since TJ Hawkinson's been traded, as well as the fact that, we don't know if we're getting Jameson Williams back at this point. Maybe, just maybe, but what are the Lions actually playing for? Like, St. Brown's in a phenomenal spot. Him and A.J. Brown are already through their bye weeks, so you will get an extra week with these receivers compared to Jalen Waddle. But keep in mind, we're only ranking for weeks 15, 16, 17 here. And then looking at A.J. Brown, this is a wide receiver that gave you the dud this past week. 1.7 fantasy points. Monday night game. Everybody watching. Obviously, people are going to be very disappointed with what they just had. But if we are looking at A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert just went down. Dallas Goedert, there's an outside chance that, hell, he misses the start of the fantasy football playoffs. Really, the only quote that we have is he'll be out an extended period of time with this shoulder injury. I don't know exactly how bad it is, but I'd say if you remove Dallas Goedert, yeah, A.J. Brown wasn't great this past week, but the target share is just going to have to go up. Like, Goedert was such a pivotal piece of this offense. And then our last wide receiver in this list will be CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's an interesting case because if we are going to be looking at what you would really want, I would say that what's most important than anything with CeeDee Lamb are for these matchups with the Dallas Cowboys team to be close games at the end of the year. We just don't want blowouts. We don't want the Cowboys running the ball in the second half. They get to play the Eagles. Yes, the Eagles have a great defense on paper, but I think the Cowboys should be able to put up points. The main thing we need to see is a close game where they have to throw the ball. And then they play the Tennessee Titans in the fantasy football championship game as well. So I do think that you're in a spot where maybe, just maybe, the Cowboys are airing it out, similar to what we had against the Green Bay Packers this past week once we get to the very end there. But I think you can make a strong argument to move CeeDee Lamb the tier down. It's just hard after the Packers game. Now, dropping down to that next tier, we're going to go Amari Cooper at 11. Now, this is a very aggressive ranking with Amari. If you've compared this to his actual ranking through the first, I believe, 10 weeks this season, I don't really care about being too aggressive here because with Amari Cooper, this is the best spot imaginable. You have the number one, and I repeat, the number one fantasy football playoff schedule among all wide receivers. On top of this, you're going to get Deshaun Watson back in. So you're combining, in my opinion, what will be close to elite quarterback play with a phenomenal schedule. I don't really know what else you want for Amari. I mean, Amari's going to be in a smash spot. And T. Higgins will be at 12. Obviously, we have to move Higgins down a bit here, knowing that we'll get Jamar Chase back in. Like, if you're looking at our weekly rankings right now, for this week, yeah, I'd rather have T. Higgins over Amari Cooper. But we're just comparing these weekly rankings to what we're going to have for weeks 15, 16, 17. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Mike Evans at 13. I know Evans has had 2 down weeks here for Tampa, yada, yada, yada. I know some people are down on him. I don't really care too much. I mean, with Mike Evans, you're still consistently getting target volume. We know Tom Brady's dropping back to throw the ball over and over and over again. I would do the same exact thing if I was Tom Brady, if I was the Buccaneers. I mean, try to just stat pad Tom Brady while you get the chance. I mean, how many players are ever going to be able to come close to Tom Brady with career passing yards, career passing touchdowns? The passing volume will be here for Evans. I don't think the schedule matters too much, if we're going to be honest. And then at 13, we're going to go Chris Olave. Michael Thomas out for the rest of the season. What you're really hoping for, at least what I'm really hoping for, if we want to go ahead and start Chris Olave, is Jameis Winston to potentially come back. Now, I don't know the real probability of this happening. Like I said, I'm hoping that it happens for our best ball teams. Not only our best ball teams, but at the same time, hell, for the air yards, for the passing volume in New Orleans, maybe you can make the argument that Andy Dalton's a better real-life quarterback than Winston at this point with the Winston turnovers. But from a fantasy point per game perspective, I think you would really want Winston for Olave. Now, 15, we are going to have Kirk. Kirk, massive riser if you were comparing it to our rest of season wide receiver rankings video this past week. But all I have to say is I apologize. I was too low on Christian Kirk. With Kirk, one thing that you have to be worried about, at least a little, is the fact that he will be on a team that's just playing for absolutely nothing by the time we get to weeks 15, 16, 17. So maybe if Kirk, just stubs his pinky toe walking around the kitchen, all of a sudden he's like, you know what, guys? Yeah, I'm going to have to take off the next month. I'm going to have to actually see it in 2023, which I wouldn't be able to fault the man if he decided to do it. I would rather prioritize teams that will be in the playoff hunt, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Mike Evans, and like Chris Godwin at 16 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Going back to what we were discussing for the past month now, I mean, with Chris Godwin, he's been getting the consistent target volume. The touchdown was going to come eventually. He had scored up to 0 until he got to Germany. Then he scores. But I mean, same thing with Evans, same thing with Godwin. When they're getting this type of volume, when they are great talents, eventually they are going to score. But now dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Mike Williams at 17. Then we'll go Debo at 18, Keenan at 19. So if we were looking at the combo or the trio of Mike Williams, Debo Samuel, Keenan Allen, let me speak on the Chargers guys real quick. And that if we were to know that both of these players come back for the fantasy football playoffs, this is how we have them ranked. Now, if we were to know, okay, well, maybe we don't get Mike Williams back, then all of a sudden, Keenan Allen, if you were to play, actually jumps up into like the Amari and Higgins tier, where vice versa with Mike Williams here. If you were to know that Keenan Allen doesn't come back, then I think you actually move Mike Williams dramatically up these rankings. So it does very much depend on the health of these wide receivers, but I'm going to be operating under the assumption that we get them back. I know we've been saying this for God knows how long now, but I mean, if we're waiting until weeks 15, 16, 17, that tells us that these guys have another month to recover. But at the end of the day, it is a possibility. I don't want to say it's likely, but it's a possibility that all of a sudden you get Keenan deciding to pull a Michael Thomas. Now, going to Debo Samuel at 18, if you look at Debo Samuel's raw fantasy points per game, he's actually lower than this in rankings. So don't be upset with me that we have Debo Samuel too low, yada, yada, yada. No, we're actually moving up Debo, giving some respect to the name, saying maybe he just starts scoring touchdowns sometime soon. In reality, we've been talking about it with Ayuk, Debo Samuel, George Kittle. When we have all three of those guys and Christian McCaffrey in the offense, it is going to be so damn hard to get enough volume here, so I am really worried. But now going down to 20, we are going to have Michael Pittman. Pittman, I thought he was extremely overvalued coming into this season when people were ranking him as a top 10 wide receiver. We had him as that mid wide receiver 2, and here I think we're still going to have him as a mid wide receiver 2. I don't think much has changed in Indianapolis. Still not a good offense, but he's getting consistent target volume, kind of like what you thought was going to happen coming into the season here. I mean, the man should score more touchdowns going forward. He's only had one so far this season. Now, going over to the Seattle Seahawks, going back to the fact that we like teams for the fantasy football playoffs that are actually playing for something. We have Lockett and Metcalf ranked back-to-back. I'm going to give Lockett his respect, even if he's not as big of a name as Metcalf. He has been crushing him if we're looking at points per game so far this season, so we'll put Lockett ahead of him. I really do like the fact that the Seattle Seahawks are leading the division. I think that Seattle maybe cools down a bit, but regardless, the games that they will have for weeks 15, 16, 17 are going to be extremely important. They are going to be going all out. Whereas 23, Terry McLaurin, we know Washington's not going to do that. I expect that you probably have Jahan Dotson expanding his role as we go forward this season. But keep in mind here with Terry McLaurin, I've said to sell him high every single week for the past 2 months. And he just went out there and crushed the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if you look at the raw points per game for Terry McLaurin so far this season, he's actually not really ahead of this. Like, we are kind of being a little bit beneficial here for McLaurin, giving him the benefit of the doubt. It is what it is. He's been great. I've been saying to sell him because I've been worried about Dotson and Curtis Samuel taking targets, but he's been overcoming it so far. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Juju Smith-Schuster. With Juju, should be 100% back for weeks 15, 16, 17. But at the same time, maybe, just maybe, Sky Moore comes from nowhere and starts to have a larger role in this offense. Maybe at that point, Kadarius Toney is more implemented, has a better chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, and Kadarius Toney sees an expanded role. I mean, maybe McCole Hardman's healthy. Maybe MVS is still the field-stretching wide receiver. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of names in Kansas City. Obviously, we're ranking Juju Smith-Schuster as the wide receiver 1 when it all falls down. I think that Juju is going to be the number 1 guy for Mahomes. But there are a lot of outside wide receivers that could expand their roles by the time we get to week 15. Now, going over to Hollywood Brown, I assume that he will be back for weeks 15, 16, 17. Like I said, if you are playing in a league where you are having 12 or more teams and 2 or more flex spots, I think Hollywood Brown could be a very intriguing buy low candidate for teams that are guaranteed to be in the fantasy football playoffs. I think he'll be a volatile wide receiver when we get to that stretch. Keep in mind, of course, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the wide receiver 1, but he does have a high ceiling weekly, and I think he should be back by week 15. Now, we have Gabe Davis at 26. I think Gabe Davis is going to be a very similar wide receiver to Hollywood Brown. Y'all know Gabe Davis, sell high guy for us early on in the year, coming off some massive performances. Last week, he was a buy low guy for us because he hadn't done anything for the past month. With Gabe Davis, this is what happens. When you have an elite level wide receiver in an offense and then another player playing alongside that option, he's not going to get targeted consistently, but he will have a very high ceiling on a week-to-week basis given his talent and the offense he's playing in. That's what we're seeing with Gabe Davis, and that's what we're seeing with Devonta Smith. We're actually going to put Smith ahead of Gabe Davis now based on the Dallas Goedert injury. You know what? We'll put Smith to the top end of this tier. Y'all know Smith was on our buy low video for us last week as well because, hell, he hadn't done anything in quite some time. But it's the same situation that you have in Philadelphia with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I think Smith does have to be a riser, however, given the Goddard injury. But now going down to our next guy, we are going to have Jakobi Meyers at 28. With Myers, I mean, I understand that, yes, he's actually been much better than this so far this season. Realistically speaking, I don't see the ceiling play, if that makes sense. I know maybe it's not the best argument. I know we're moving him down for almost no reason other than he doesn't have the big name appeal. But I would say that there's an outside chance Tyquan Thornton expands his role by the time we get to the end of the year. I'd say on top of this that the New England Patriots just don't have a passing offense that's really ever going to make you excited in general. I don't know. Let me know if you think I'm being unfair to Jakobi Meyers, because as we talk about this ranking, I think we are, at least if you look at the points so far this season. But then our next guy, we're going to go Ayuk at 29. With Ayuk, I mean, the man has 80 receiving yards pretty much every week over the past month. But going back to what we were discussing previously with Deebo Samuel, we have Ayuk, Deebo, Kittle, CMC. I don't think the passing volume is going to be there for you to get so excited about these guys individually as pass catchers when Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the quarterback. But now we're going to go Sutton at 30. Now, y'all know I am not a big Sutton fan at all. And with Courtland Sutton, this ranking is very much dependent on what we have with the health of Jerry Jeudy. So I'm assuming Jerry Jeudy will be active and will be playing by the time we get to weeks 15, 16, 17. There's an outside chance that this ankle injury with Jerry Jeudy is a little more serious, where he misses more than a month. And if that were to be the case, then hell yeah. I mean, I think that you should be very excited about going through and moving Courtland Sutton up these rankings. But I'm going to be ranking it as if you have Jerry Jeudy good to go, but maybe not at 100%. If that makes sense. Also, Denver going to be another one of these teams that we were talking about that's not going to be playing for anything at this time of the year. Then we're going to go with George Pickens at 31. Another team that's not playing for anything at this time of the year. I know Deontay Johnson's been better so far this season, but I'm going to assume that the rookie continues to get better, especially the player that's been more efficient when you move Chase Claypool from the offense getting targets. But I want to know your opinion on this, because I felt like it was very difficult to make this list where there's so many other guys that I want to rank, so many other guys that I want to get in. So please let me know who you think we should take off the list and who we should add in. Obviously, we have guys like Christian Watson, Allen Lazard. I'm just a little worried if we get Randall Cobb, Christian Watson, Allen Lazard, as well as Romeo Doubs all in here for the fantasy football playoffs. What exactly is the role going to look like for each one of these guys? We have Deontay Johnson, very bad offense. I think George Pickens maybe continues to expand the role. We have DJ Moore, horrendous offense. Love the player. And you know what? As we speak through this, we will put DJ Moore on here. Let's throw DJ Moore at least in the same tier as those other guys. It would be difficult for us to have anything else. And then we also have guys like, Garrett Wilson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tyler Boyd. Let me know what you're thinking with these rankings. Donovan Peoples-Jones, a player that has upside given the quarterback play that he'll have, going back to what we were discussing with the number one fantasy football playoff schedule for the Cleveland Browns wide receivers in weeks 15, 16, 17. But please let me know what you're thinking. Of course, thank you so much for checking out the video. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down there in the comment section. But thank you again. I appreciate you. Hope you have a great day and hope we get to see you in the live stream tonight.